Hello and welcome to another episode. This is episode 9 of TraegerMethod Oil Painting. Today we're working on a small 12 by 12 inch oil painting on panel. It's on masonite, I believe. Focused in up close here. Working with the liner brush. Liner brush is a round brush with a long, you can see there, long bristles. Close to an inch long. I love using the liner brush on these panel paintings. Here I am painting in shadows on these roots, maybe, cords. I'm not sure what they are. Vines that are going over this shape. This shape is something like a pillow, like a log-shaped pillow that also has hollowed out branches coming off of it. The pillow on top of some pillows. Putting in the shadows, since the body of the thing is yellow, it's obvious. It's an easy decision to go for a purple shadow. Make the shadow a complementary color. I've talked before in previous episodes about creating shadows by painting around the darker hue with a lighter hue. A subtractive shadow, you might say. Is that subtractive? Doesn't matter. Here I'm painting a darker hue for the shadow. This is kind of the intuitive or obvious way to paint a shadow. A darker area under the object that casts the shadow. Complementary colors, colors on the opposite side of the color wheel always make nice shadows. Now there's the whole composition as it is now. I'm liking the way the pillows, those 3 pillows that are stacked up, I'm liking the light effect on that. The shadow that's cast. I don't really know where the light source is on this one. There's a bunch of light sources, it seems, around this object. It's the kind of thing you need to stop and think about from time to time. Where are the lights coming from? This composition needs something. It needs to have, I don't know, some motion in it. Water dripping out of that thing. Where is that thing, the branch faucet, in relation to that bluish gray well thing that's on the side. How do they relate to one another? I was thinking of having little people standing on the edge of that trough, kind of looking into it, maybe dipping their hands into it. That's an idea I had while working on this last night. I was inspired to paint these vines, if I recall. I think I was looking at The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. There's one scene that's kind of an Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden scene where the snake is in the tree, and the tree has this plant growing around it that has these little disc-like leaves. So I just thought, well, why not make the leaves in this one just kind of gold coins? The gold coin looking. I'm very pleased with how this painting has a limited color palette. You see, there I am putting in rather than painting dark over light, I'm painting light over dark. You see what I'm saying right there? I could leave something there. I didn't leave it, but I could have. What was I saying? I was talking about something. I can't remember what it was, honestly. Well, it needs to have some kind of action or movement, human, animal forms. I think, they don't always have to, but I feel like that would fit in here. Might bring some visual interest. Earlier today, I was listening to a podcast by Timothy Snyder, the author of On Tyranny, among other books. Timothy Snyder is an incredibly clear speaker and thinker who has studied. I need to learn more about him. I don't know much about him, but I need to learn more because he is a voice that is incredible. His insight is so useful. It's so easy to understand. It makes so much sense. So clear. He talks about rising fascist autocracy, oligarchy in America. Has great insight into the Russian style of doing things. Of manipulating and controlling people's opinions, minds, ideas, and thereby manipulating reality here in physical space. One of Timothy Snyder's podcasts is called Timothy Snyder Speaks. S-N-Y-D-E-R. Timothy Snyder Speaks. He has released, I don't know how many episodes, but not many. And they're very short. They're about 15 minutes long. They're just short, very brief little talks by Snyder about a variety of angles, subjects. He talks about the notion of America first as a slogan and a philosophy. He just bursts that apart. He talks about something that I believe he coins the term Sado-populism to describe the style of populism, which of course isn't true populism, but the style of what is called populism as demonstrated by Trump, among others. And it's this idea that, this is what I understand. I need to listen to it some more, take some notes, but what I understand is the idea is nobody offers policies to make a better future anymore. It's not about that. This is also something that Adam Curtis talked about in hypernormalization, this idea that there's no more hopeful visions of the future. It's all about just managing the crisis of now. So you live in an eternal now. There is no future. And what the Sado-populist does is you constantly loop back to a past. When a segment of the population enjoyed even more unfettered privilege. And you can, it seems counterintuitive that a demagogue could benefit from causing pain to the very people that demagogue counts as supporters. Like, how can that be a winning strategy? The idea that Snyder puts forward, as I understand it, is that the demagogue can appeal to his followers by saying, everybody's suffering, but you're suffering less than them. You're suffering the least. And that way you don't have to offer anything that improves someone's life. You just say, it could be much worse. You could be a black person in America where you'd have it worse. And that's what appeals to like a white Trump base. As long as there's somebody below you who's catching more hell, it makes your position seem better, even if you're not thriving, even if you're barely surviving. I think a lot of us, when we saw like the Trump rally in Oklahoma City, or Tulsa rather, in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, we're struck by this idea like he doesn't even care about his own followers. Like he's putting them directly in danger. And it's kind of counterintuitive, shocking, or whatever. I mean, it wasn't, but it could be. It wasn't to me, but it could be. The reason it wasn't surprising is because it's not as though, oops, we just switched paintings there. It wasn't surprising because, Trump's followers, his base, they don't primarily follow him because they think there's going to be some policy he puts in place that will make their lives better. I mean, a vague idea of like, oh, the economy's better under him, But what does that even mean to most people? To most of his supporters. Stocks are up, but, for a while they were. But if you just appeal to grievance, and historical mythology, historical myths, you know, and you can get people excited even when everything around them is failing and when their own lives seem bleak. Because if you deal in grievance, then you always have someone to point to or something to point to. As the cause of the suffering of the privileged class. I can't recommend listening to the Timothy Snyder podcast, Timothy Snyder Speaks. I can't recommend it highly enough. I want to listen to each one of those episodes and take notes and really sometimes you'll pieces of information will come in a concise, compact dose, and it just inspires me to listen to it over and over and really take in the information and make it so that it's my own. This painting that we're looking at now is another 12 by 12 inch painting. This one has been a bit frustrating. It doesn't fully make sense to me even now looking at it. You know, what am I looking at? See this face of a reclining figure sort of going into this stack of books, which I've just put some ornamentation on, some lines that I'm not crazy about looking at them now. Well, the thing is, it needs some major resolutions. Yeah, this one definitely pushes the boundaries of making sense. What I see is like these 3 books that have these dripping or extended pointers on the ends of the pages, but it's a book in the shape of an E, the letter E, which again is repeated on the other side, which doesn't have any significance that I can't say exactly why that symbol appears so often in my work. Is it a 3? Is it an E? Is it just a symbol that looks like that, but it actually isn't? It's an idea. This one, I feel like these I see these figures down in the left-hand side look like kneeling monks, maybe in robes. There I am doing some work with the liner brush again. See that high value blue. You got a bamboo tree in the background there. I think I'll put in more tropical foliage maybe. I feel like this one could use some major editing or something. the space needs to make a little more sense. Oh, I know what I was going to say about that other one that I was proud of. This is funny that I'm just remembering what I was going to talk about 10-15 minutes ago, was that I was pleased with that painting before because it has a limited color palette. It's basically like yellow, purple, a little bit of blue, black, some brown, you know, which is what is made by yellow and purple being complementary colors. Complementary colors mixed together always create a different kinds of brown. But I was, you know, sometimes I'll look at my paintings and I see that I tend to use very similar colors in all of them, and I tend to use like all the colors. You know, there's the green part, the blue part, the red part, the orange part, that, you know, they are just arranged in different ways, but the colors tend to appear. And there's been times where I thought, well, this is a failing somehow of my practice. But then I think, it's okay. It's okay to do that too. There's no rules. You know, if you want to try something different, try something different. Use a limited color palette. Use a limited actual paint palette of paints. About to cough. Hang on a sec. If it's not good, it's not done. That's why I don't sweat these paintings at frustrating when they're at frustrating phases. I don't worry about it. Just keep working on it, set it aside, let it dry, come back, do some more. I was talking about Timothy Snyder on tyranny and the Timothy Snyder Speaks podcast. Another voice that I find very, well, it's strange. It's really strange to say I find it comforting, but because I find honesty, honest appraisal, clear-eyed view from 50,000 feet or whatever kind of speakers very comforting. And I was going to say that one person that I would recommend, again, very highly to anyone interested to get a broader perspective on the era we're living in and what we're going through in the United States, is Christopher Hedges. Not Christopher Hitchens, Christopher Hedges, Chris Hedges, the former New York Times writer, editor, author of many books, too many to name. American Fascism, or American Fascists, it's one of his books. He has many books, many speeches and interviews on YouTube. You can look. He wrote a fantastic essay called The Coming Collapse. Not sure who that was for, but if you Google Christopher Hedges, The Coming Collapse, it's easy to find. And even though he paints an incredibly dire portrait of where we are, it is a portrait that rings true. It is apparently true. It is apparent that it is true. His perspective. What he sees unfolding. And that I find comforting because at least you know. You know. and you don't feel crazy. See, right there in the painting, I'm using burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is a wonderful brown for warming things up. It's an orangish, semi-transparent brown. There I am putting in some yellow or orange glazing. Glazing, of course, being thin, transparent layers of paint. One of my favorite colors is this Old Holland orange. I don't know what it's called exactly. The tube is too dirty. I can't actually read the name of the paint, but it's an Old Holland transparent orange. Old Holland being a very, very distinguished and very expensive brand of oil paints from Holland, from the Netherlands. I love using that orange, but there's a number of oranges. I use a transparent oxide orange, which is a kind of brownish orange, transparent. I was talking about burnt sienna. That's a nice one to bring in. This painting, I feel like it needs more vegetation, more tropical plants. What's the foreground going to be there? That area where there's kind of dashes of color that look kind of like coins. And what's up with these glass sort of tube things that are coming down off of that swirly kind of headdress thing? What is that doorway there? I don't even understand what that is anymore. Originally, it was like there were steps coming down. There was a little door there, and there were steps going. It was like a little fairy house structure. Now that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, so maybe I should just take out that little yellow doorway down there. Maybe I will. It's an interesting time to be alive. I've been feeling COVID fatigue lately. You know, watching this country just, I mean, yeah, it's really hard to even put into words like what you're witnessing on a day-to-day basis, just the abject failure of America. One of the things that Timothy Snyder really hits home too is like, well, it's something that I think a lot, which is like, you know, the bigger story kind of in the world or in America is just like that we can't handle the internet. You know, the internet has done all this. Like there wouldn't be, you know, this anti-vax thing, this like anti-science, this bizarre cult of personality, all that stuff. It's all internet. It's all cyber. One of the things that Timothy Snyder talks about is this idea that, like, you know, we lost a war. The United States lost a war to Russia, to Russian oligarchy. And now we're living in an occupied cyber country. Timothy Snyder, Christopher Hedges, Chris Hedges. Check them out. And thanks for watching TraegerMethod Oil Painting, Episode 9. See you next week.